Hi there. Pastor Geoff coming to you from my living room in what looks like will be a nice blizzard tomorrow. Anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Transfiguration story since we're not going to meet in person. The one that we're going to read this year comes from Mark's Gospel, right smack dab in the middle, chapter 9. It comes after chapter 8, which has this really interesting piece where Jesus asks his disciples who people say that he is. Who do you think I am? And the disciples have a bunch of different answers for that. They say, well, some say John the Baptist, some say one of the prophets, maybe even Elijah, one of the more important prophets. And Jesus turns and asks them, but who do you say that I am? And it's only Peter that says, well, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. And Jesus more or less says, well, you're right. Right after that, he tells the disciples what is going to happen to him. That he is going to be betrayed and handed over. That he will suffer. That he will die. And he says, if any want to be my followers, they need to pick up their cross and follow me. And Peter, the one who just said, you are the Christ, the Messiah, he says, God forbid it, Lord. I am not going to let that happen to you. And Jesus turns and says to him, get behind me, Satan. Satan means accuser. So what does it mean for Jesus to be among us? That he is the Messiah, that he is the Christ. It means he will suffer and die. And it means on the third day he will be raised from the dead. The Transfiguration story shows that all to us in miniature. So Jesus goes up the mountain. He brings James and John and Peter along with him. Now when he gets to the top, he is transformed. Metamorphosis is the word, actually, that is used there. Transfigured is the way we remember it. He glows. Never quite sure what to do with glow-in-the-dark Jesus, but he glows. And his clothes are dazzling white. And standing with him are two figures that just kind of pop out of nowhere. You get Moses and Elijah, two people from the Old Testament, Moses being kind of the figurehead of the law, and Elijah being the figurehead of the prophets. So you have the law and the prophets and the Messiah, all standing there together. Now Peter has a great reaction. He says, well, let's just set up camp right here because this is pretty awesome. And think about it, we do this a lot of times too. We are in it for the big event, the mountaintop experience, and they're certainly having one here. So he wants to set up shop. He wants to set up tents up there. And Jesus tells him, no, we're not going to do that. Now think about it, even in our life of faith, this is the thing we do. We make baptism into the event rather than the beginning of our lifelong faith. We make First Communion a special celebration and not the beginning of our lifelong need to feed at the table of the Lord. We make confirmation, graduation, rather than an affirmation of that faith as we are sent out into the world and into leadership in the church. We make marriages about the wedding party and not about a lifelong commitment between two people. Even funerals sometimes, I wonder, don't we make it about the person and not about the promises of God to comfort those who have gathered and be reminded of the resurrection to come? This is all that Peter's doing. He said, let's just set up shop right here. This is the moment, the big ticket event. And Jesus says, no, we're not going to do that. A voice from heaven comes. It's God. This is my son, the beloved, listen to him. And suddenly when the disciples see this and they look back at Jesus, they turn around. They notice the bright lights are gone. The shining is gone. Glow-in-the-dark Jesus is now just the regular old guy. Moses, Elijah, they're not part of it anymore. Instead, all they see is Jesus. Now, I'm a big fan of Jimmy Fallon. I don't know if you watch The Tonight Show, but I do. And one of the fun things that he does every once in a while is he has these lip sync competitions. Well, after the Super Bowl, on Super Bowl Sunday, he had a great lip syncing contest between him and Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. And when they started, what happens is they each pick two songs. They don't know which songs they're going to do, and then they lip sync them in front of the audience of the show. And it's really, really, really funny. So Will Ferrell was the first to go, and he decided that he would lip sync to Beyonce's song, Drunk in Love. And he sang it passionately. Well, he lip synced it passionately, and he even started to dance around. And when it was all over and everyone was in hysterics and the applause was great and it was time to hand it over to Jimmy, he came back over to the microphone and he set it back on the stand and he said, "Well, you really can't unsee that." That's what happens in this story. Once you get the picture of who Jesus is, he's the Messiah, the Christ, you see him illuminated in all his glory that is to come. You hear the voice of God that says, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." When all the fanciness of the lights go away, the Super Bowl is over, the lip-syncing competition is done. You go back to your regular life, even if you're snowed in this morning, and all you see is Jesus. You can't unsee that. Actually, what happens to us in our lives of faith is that we are the ones who are really transformed. We are the ones that go through a metamorphosis. We are the ones whose lives are altered. We come looking for some big ticket event. We come looking for meaning or purpose. We come bearing our guilt or our shame, our sinfulness, the weight of everything that weighs upon us from this world. And after we see Jesus, you can't unsee that. You are welcomed back into the conversation of what it means to pick up your cross and follow him. What it means to see the world with fresh eyes. What if we looked at the world because we've seen Jesus? When all we see is Jesus, what do you see in the world around you? When you see pain and suffering, don't you see the cross? When you see your own guilt and shame, don't you see forgiveness? When you see destruction and division, don't you see resurrection that is to come? Take a good look at this Jesus. See him in dazzling light. Hear the voice of God call out. See him standing on the shoulder to shoulder with Moses and Elijah. See the scriptures opened in a new way. Come again to the table when we gather once more. Put your hand in the font and mark yourself with a cross on your forehead to remind you that you've been claimed forever. Participate in the life of our congregation and participate in the life of your neighbors and friends and colleagues with fresh eyes, because all you see is Jesus. This Jesus who comes to transform you. I wish you well on this snow day. I hope you'll be dug out soon. Hope you stay warm. Hope you stay cozy. I hope you go in peace and make peace wherever you go, with fresh eyes to see Jesus at every turn. Amen.